28 years ago yesterday, my friend James Gilmore, Josh Peterson, and I formed a partnership and utilized our complementary talents to get into the engineering design business. It wasn't easy at first, but we persevered, marketed our services carefully, and eventually managed to establish a base of business. We also tried several ideas and products that were rejected by others. A few of them were a raving success, and we went from a mere existence to a damn rich one. Along the way, we acquired dozens of employees, wives, children, houses, country club memberships, and a lot more problems than we had when we were smart engineering students. We also employed the services of a brilliant accountant who was a genius at hiding money from the IRS and nosy wives. This was important because my future wife had parents who wanted to protect their precious daughter's money. So I happily agreed to a prenuptial agreement that not only protected my growing fortune, but also guaranteed that my dear wife would remain faithful during our marriage. In the early years, my wife Sheila was a good partner, a loving mother to our 2 boys, and a business assistant. In recent years, however, she has frankly become a pain in the ass. Her nagging on just about everything not only cooled our ardor in the bedroom, but ruined every aspect of married life. The arrival of her old college friend, Mary Alice McGafferty, after years of living in another part of the country, seemed to coincide with a change in my wife's attitude. Now that the relationship between us had soured and the boys had separated to colleges, the stage was set for our 25th anniversary reunion. The fact that Sheila had lasted so long in the marriage was due, I believe, to 3 main factors. The first and foremost was the prenup that her family insisted on, and that bound her to the bonds of marriage unless I screwed up and became unfaithful. The second reason was that no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't prove that I had cheated on her. The third and final reason was that she couldn't find a rich enough alternative to me. As noted, we were approaching the 25th anniversary of our now loveless marriage. Longer and much more stable was my partnership with James Gilmore. Jim and I were still in engineering school when we were assigned as lab partners. We somehow hit it off right away, and by the end of our first year together, we had become firm friends. His girlfriend, Betty Hastings, was a year younger than Jim and joined our group the following year. Betty was a pretty girl who didn't aspire to be overtly glamorous, but had that warm sexiness that is really attractive. Over the years, Sheila's relationship with Jim and Betty had waxed and waned. Sheila tried to attract them to our group of friends, but to no avail. They just didn't fit in, and I didn't blame them because most of Sheila's friends were rowdy party people, and the Gilmores were much more reserved. Jim and I certainly had a great relationship, and we were like twins when it came to problem-solving and conceptualizing. Betty was a wonderful support for Jim and worked many unpaid hours in the early days of the business to ensure our success. Unfortunately, they were unable to have children of their own, but as far as Sheila allowed, I shared mine with them. Jim began having health problems when we were about 17 years old. Since then, his health gradually declined until he died 2 years ago. During his decline, illness, and eventual death, I continued to pay him a full partnership salary because of his contribution to the early success of the partnership and my affection for them both. Sheila, of course, objected to the money going to them, but I ignored her wishes. Unbeknownst to Sheila, I had been approached several months ago by a conglomerate interested in our patents and several proprietary designs. We talked for several weeks and eventually agreed to buy the intellectual property for $52 million and the local bricks and mortar for $1 to $2. The reason for the split price was that Jim, Betty, and I owned the intellectual property through an offshore corporation headquartered in Switzerland, and Sheila owned a brick and mortar shop that was soon to find a tenant. With the boys already out of the house and away at school, it was time for me to step up my Get Rid of Sheila program. Over the years, my dear wife had repeatedly violated the prenup, and I had ample visual evidence of this. When her longtime college friend Mary Alice moved back to the neighborhood, the two of them engaged in clandestine debauchery. Little did they realize that most of their escapades were captured on video and digitally. My sources told me that Sheila had something planned for the anniversary celebration, and so I prepared my own response. The days leading up to Saturday night passed quietly, and one might say thoughtfully, as if we were both carefully considering all the alternatives before acting on the party. Sheila was dressed in state-of-the-art clothing and makeup the way only a 40-year-old bitch could be. I didn't see her eat much all day, no doubt due to the need to squeeze into a dress a few sizes smaller. The lack of volume in her stomach immediately caused problems when we arrived at the reception. During the pre-dinner cocktails, the waiter set out trays of champagne, and my wife made sure she didn't dry out on that fizzy drink. Sheila and I were separated by a crowd of well-wishers, friends, relatives, and acquaintances. Knowing that I was giving a speech that evening, I had saved my considerable portion of alcohol for a later time, but Sheila had not. When we were called to sit down, I found that my wife was already quite drunk and could barely handle the controls. I sat her down at the table and tried to feed her scones and other snacks, but to no avail. Even her dinner companion, Mary Alice, couldn't handle her. Somehow we got through dinner and moved on to speeches and joyous desert toasts. Some of them were sincere and heartfelt and had great meaning. Others were playfully funny and elicited pleasant laughter, and then it was my turn. As I started to rise, Sheila grabbed my sleeve, pulled me down, and jumped to her feet herself. "Friends, relatives, I want to say a word or two about this damn fine marriage. That asshole is a shitty lover, and I know for a fact he couldn't find me on a fucking road map." With those words, I pulled her down, and her friend Mary Alice, who was sitting next to her, pulled her to her side to calm her down and silence her. I immediately stood up and took control of the crowd. "Please, friends, calm down and I will explain everything. Sheila has had a very rough day. She took a huge drinking load today because I told her this afternoon that I was going to enforce the terms of our marriage contract that her family forced me to sign 25 years ago. As soon as I finish speaking, a slideshow will begin featuring all the lovers my dear wife has had over the years. The documentation of these encounters is in the brochures that are now being handed out." I sprinted out of the reception area as soon as the lights dimmed and the slideshow began. Judging by the audience's reaction as I left, the pictures of Sheila and her various lovers had caused quite a stir. I didn't linger, but jumped into my pre-arranged extended cab truck and drove home to pick up the last of my suitcases and electronics. 10 minutes later, I was on my way south to pick up Betsy. Yes, that's right, Betsy. My late partner's Betsy. Tonight, she and I were leaving for an extended vacation on the warm sea to decide how to spend and invest our $52 million. We had grown close during Jim's lifetime, but especially in the period after his death and immediately afterward. She was still an attractive woman and, most importantly, we trusted each other. Epilogue. I nudged a firm, tanned buttock with my big toe and said, "Let's have a drink." "Albert or Rosalind?" "It's your favorite, Sir Albert." As Betsy rolled over and settled into the chaise lounge, I admired the beautiful firm breasts of my 38-year-old companion, tanned by the tropical sun to an attractive shade of nut brown. "Gosh, Bets, I never cease to marvel at your beautiful tatami. To think you hid these wonders under a modest closet for so long." "Only hid them from lechers like you, big guy. Now don't forget to tip Albert well, and then I think I'd like to take the drinks back to the room so we can indulge once more. Do you mind?" "Albert." "Sir? Would you be so kind as to bring those drinks back to our room? We're going to have a siesta there." "Right away, sir." Reaching up, I held out my hand to Betsy, and she took it in her dainty light brown fingers. As I helped her up, I couldn't help but admire her slender golden body, smoothly combed below her shoulders. When she stood up fully, her free fingers touched me lightly. "I see little Josh is taking an active interest in today." "Of course he is, sweetheart. After all, it's been at least 4 hours since we last saw him. Oh, look, he's pouting and angry.